Alright, so hey guys, I'm here with our next video today. Now, we've kind of been talking about Andrew Jackson a little bit earlier, and I am going to put a video up there for his, but we've spent so much time talking about him in class this week that I thought it was more appropriate to go ahead and start talking about a few of the other topics that we need to cover. The first of these topics is going to be religion and reform. This is a driving force behind a lot of stuff that we're going to be covering here. Is the changes in the religion and how that sparks a lot of the reform movements, and also another type of movement we're going to call the utopian communities. This idea of a perfect world. So we'll take a look at those. I'm using a PowerPoint that was created by one of my colleagues at the first school I taught at. I hope he doesn't mind if he sees it up here. But let's go ahead and get into it. The first couple of slides are just some objectives. You don't really have to know all of this right up front. It's just kind of what we're going to be going over. Okay? Alright, so the Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening is going to be this big social movement, this big religious movement, focusing on that when hell is a real place, right? But as opposed to the First Great Awakening, where it's talking about God wants you, you're hanging by a thread, and God can throw you into the pit of hell at any time. This is really going to focus on the salvation and that all people are people, all people have a divine spark, and that everybody can get into heaven. So let's take a look at how some of these things affect it. So you got spiritual reform from within. Social reform movements are going to spring from that idea of equality. So we're going to focus on a few different reform movements. The first one being one of the first being the temperance movement. In temperance, anytime you see this word temperance, it just means abstaining from alcohol use. Asylum and penal reform, how are we treating our mentally ill and the criminals? At this time, we're kind of treating them the same. How are we going to change that system a little bit? Abolition, the abolition of slavery, women's rights, and then also the reason why you're here, education. So the Second Great Awakening, what we said was a religious revival. It's focusing on the Protestant church. A lot of things that come out of this is that you do not have to have a church to be a church. You don't have to have a building. So there's going to be a lot of focus on camp meetings, tent meetings, revivals. They're going to be focusing on helping the poor people, and everyone is equal in the eyes of God, no matter who they are, no matter if they're rich or if they're a slave. This is just a quote by a guy named Alexis de Tocqueville. He's a French guy, if you didn't know by his name. He is going to tour America. The Europeans are fascinated by America, especially the French. These ideas of liberty and equality and a brave new land and figuring out how to start a country from scratch. So the people are coming here all the time and just looking and seeing what we're doing and fascinated by all these new transitions. And one of the things he comments about is that religion is going to be a big force in politics. And we can kind of see that again today. One of the big ideas in politics today is a lot of our controversies are pushed by these religious moral authorities, right? These religious ideas, things like abortion and all those things, right? But he's saying that religion is pushing politics, right? Revivals. The Second Great Awakening, we can almost see where it started at. It's going to start in this western New York region. This is where a lot of these Protestant churches start to pop up. They start to have these camp meetings, a revival. Everyone is equal. Everybody can get into heaven. And you can start to see these revivals start to move kind of south. And once they get to Virginia, they all start heading west. Because the South is going to be very, very conservative. They're going to be very resistant to change. And so most of this is happening from Virginia north to the west. Right. Camp meetings. Camp meetings, like I said, you didn't have to have a church building. A lot of your more famous preachers during this time period are going to be traveling evangelists. They're going to go from town to town. They're going to spend the night. Whoever has an open room at their house, they're staying there. And they'll probably have church every night for a week, and then they're gone to the next house, or next town. This is called riding the circuit. Now, if you've ever taken a look at North Carolina Wesleyan College in Rocky Mount, they're a Methodist college. The Methodist Church is going to spring from this idea. If you take a look at their logo, and I'll put a logo up here in the class for you, but their logo is a bishop, a preacher, on a horse, carrying a Bible, coming from this Methodist where they have to ride the circuit. They have to ride from town to town to town, and they're called the Battling Bishops. Well, Wesleyan's team is. Right? So this is another picture of camp meetings. Everybody goes there. It's kind of a social event as well. Religious groups. There's a lot of different religious movements popping up here. You're going to have the Mormons, which we're going to focus on in a little bit. The Millerites, the Fourierists, they're going to be anti-slavery churches, and all these different revivals. And one thing to mention is that you see the area we're talking about, Western New York. They're going to be the movers and shakers in the Second Great Awakening. The Millerites, think about very Amish type people, communal living as a community with farm work. The Fourierists are going to be more similar, but they're going to be focused more on industrialization as well. The only way you can get to heaven is through hard work. Charles G. Finney. Let me slow down for a second before I lose my breath. Charles G. Finney. He's going to be one of the most famous preachers of his time. He's a traveling evangelist. He's like the Billy Graham of his day. And he's from the north, and he's going around. He doesn't even write his sermons down. Whatever comes to mind, whatever town he's in, that's what he speaks on. But one of the things that kind of that switches about him is he is a strict abolitionist. And he goes so far with it that he will not give communion to anybody who owns slaves. Why is this such a big deal? Because if you're in the 1830s, you really believe that the only way you can get to heaven is if you take communion. So by this preacher refusing to give communion to slave owners, he is saying that unless you wipe out this sin of slavery, I'm not going to give you communion. That way, you can't get into heaven. Right? So he's more extreme than most in this time period. This quote, the ranges of tents, the fires reflecting light, the candles and lamps illuminating the encampment, hundreds moving to and fro, the preaching, the praying, the singing and shouting, like the sound of many waters, was enough to swallow up all the powers of contemplation. What he's doing there, he is just basically describing what he sees in these places when he's giving these big camp meetings, the tents and the campfires and stuff like that. Joseph Smith. So now we're moving into this religion of Mormonism. The Church of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church. They are a branch off the Christian religious tree. Some people would put them in there with Protestantism. Others would put them out into their own branch. But the basics behind the religion is that they believe when Jesus ascended in the Middle East, that he descended and preached in North America. That's very, 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 you're taking an entire religion and reducing it to 1 minute, so that's just a very, very small snippet of the religion. But the founder of the church is Joseph Smith Jr. He lives in Western New York. 1823, he finds golden tablets. An angel helps him decode what the tablets say, and he is able to translate that into the Book of Mormon. One of the things that's going to happen when he's in Western New York is that this is very controversial, and people aren't going to like him. So they are going to force the Mormon church to move. Well, they move west. Like everybody during that day, you're moving west. They moved to Illinois. We'll talk about him and the assassination attempt on him in a second. Or successful assassination, actually. One of the things is when they get to Illinois and Indiana, they are not met with any more acceptance than when they were in Western New York. And Joseph Smith is going to be jailed on charges of bigamy. While he's in the jail, there's going to be a group of people that come after him to assassinate him. One of the people in town warned him before it happens, give him a pistol. So when the people break into his jail cell to kill him, he shoots one of them. They shoot at him. He's injured. He jumps out of the second-story window up here. Easy jail cell to break out of, mind you. Jumps down, breaks his leg. The assassins come outside, and they murder him in the streets. Right, you can see the cell up here, or the house in the court where he was kept. And then he's murdered down here. You got the guy with the black face, painted black face, that's going to be the assassin. Right. So after this, his followers, the Mormon church, have to do something. They can't stay in Carthage, Illinois. So they are going to move westward again, right, all the way out to Salt Lake City. What they are going to call as their New Zion, the new Jerusalem, the chosen land. They see this as the American chosen land. Now they're in the middle of a great big desert, but they see that as a good thing. Or Salt Lake City is kind of a oasis in the middle of the desert, except that salt water. So they got to find other sources to drink from. They believe that their removal out there is going to help them. It was going to protect them from other people persecuting them. Whether that happened or not is another thing. There's going to be the Mountain Meadows Massacre, where they there's a lot of controversy about that. So I won't get into it right now because we only have a limited amount of time. Hopefully this thing isn't going to go on too long. However, one of the big things about them moving to Utah is that a large part of the Mormon church is still in Utah today. This is going to be Brigham Young. He's going to be the guy responsible for moving the Mormons to Utah, and the college out there is going to be named for him. And this is another picture of Salt Lake City, or the Salt Lake Valley. Very lush, but surrounded by almost like a desert. Another thing is that African Americans are starting to develop their own churches as well. Christianity kind of comes into African American culture by way of their experience as slaves. Right? So they hear these stories of escaping from slavery, the Exodus. So they are going to start to develop their own churches. It's going to focus on the singing of songs, spirituals, all focused on the story of the Israelites delivered from slavery in Egypt and find the promised land in Israel. A call and response. And the church's name that comes out of this is the African Methodist Episcopal Board, the AME Church. And then we're kind of transitioning in here into the abolitionist movement. They kind of go one and the same. The abolitionist movement, one of the big movements is going to be the transcendentalist movement, focusing on individuality and social justice. So transcendentalists like Henry David Thoreau, Walt Whitman, and there's a couple other ones it's failing to come to mind right now. They kind of have this agenda they're pushing, and a lot of it is to give freedom to the slave, give well-being to the poor and the miserable, give learning to the ignorant, give health to the sick, give peace and justice to society. Do right by your brothers and your sisters, essentially. The abolitionist movement. You know, we're going to stop here, and we're going to pick up on another video because I don't want these things to be 20 minutes long. So you'll see me in a couple seconds.